listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.
Hey folks, welcome to Friday night. It is May 14th in the year of your Lord and mine, 2021. Can you believe we've made it this far? I was just talking to somebody today about high school, and somebody mentioned, wow, 40 years has gone by already since high school. For me, 43 years since I graduated from high school. That seems incredible and impossible. By the way, this is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to my show, the Intrepid radio broadcast, right here on the Odyssey Radio Network, and also simulcasting on my YouTube channel in video. And so right now, we're not live on Odyssey Radio, but we will be again very shortly. And so I want to welcome you to the YouTube channel, where you can see the video. You can join the live chat room and meet the other members of this Intrepid family. Hit the join button down below, and you can find 3 ways that you can join this broadcast. $2 a month, $5 a month, $15 a month. Click on that button. It'll bring up a separate screen. You'll be able to see what you want to do if you want to do it. I'd appreciate it. Thank you very much. Help support our cause here. And so I want to thank you all for coming in. And before we really get rolling here, there's a song. When Sam and I, my older son, my 20-year-old, we were driving back from Louisiana to the Wisconsin area where we live. And at one point, you know, you do all kinds of things to let the time go by. And there was one point where we just threw on some Gaelic Storms songs, and we were singing along to them. He kind of grew up with those songs around. My friends and I were all into Gaelic Storm and the Irish bands and all of that. And one of the songs that keeps going through my mind, so I had to call it up here. And it's a fun little song. It's called The Bear and the Butcher Boy. And it goes like this. And it starts with the chorus. It says, wrapped up in brown paper. It says, wrapped up in brown paper, tied up with white string. He would whistle as he went when he was happy. He would sing. And it goes, la, 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 going on in the background. And the verses go like this. Billy Batty was a butcher boy. He rode a butcher's bike down Dublin's dirty back streets at the dawning of daylight. He loved a girl named Lucy. Lucy loved another lad, a soldier tall and handsome. This made young Billy sad. One day a circus came to town. It had a dancing bear. Billy had to go, for he knew she would be there. The second he rode up, he knew that something was awry. The crowd was all at gallop. Run before you die. Well, the bear was mad with hunger as he broke free from his chain. He hayed, H-A-D-E, rampaged through the big top when it all at once he came across the poor young Lucy, fallen curled up on the ground. The soldier boy was hiding, he was nowhere to be found. This is wrapped up in brown paper, tied up with white string. He'd whistle a happy tune as he would whistle as he went when he was happy. Bum bum. He would sing, and it's got the fiddles and the violin, or the bagpipes and all that. Now Billy heard her screams, and he knew at once what he must do. He took off on his trusty bike, and to her aid he flew. He cycled right up to the bear and threw a piece of meat. The bear spun right around, and he caught that beefy treat. He scarfed it down in just one bite and looked up for some more. Round him circled Billy, trailing sausage on the floor. Just out of reach he kept him as he lured the beast away. The beast had got a taste, now brave young Billy was his prey. Wrapped up in brown paper, tied up with white string, he'd whistle as he went when he was happy. He would sing. Now it goes on, and it says, "Now Billy heard her screams, and he knew it." Oh, I already sang that chorus, that verse. It says, 3 times around the tent, the creature had to stop. He rested and he thought, then he began to skip and hop. He danced a polka and a waltz to everyone's delight. The crowd began to clap and cheer at such a wondrous sight. Billy tossed the bear a lamb chop and a mighty T-bone steak. The dancing just got faster and the ground began to shake. He swallowed whole 2 turkeys, strings of sausage galore. Then full he gently lay down and began to loudly snore. Well, the crowd went wild with pleasure, and out to our hero Lucy ran. She forgot the soldier boy, now brave young Billy was her man. Now the moral of this story is, if you want to win your Lucy, you'd better have a trusty bike and a sausage plump and juicy. A sausage plump and juicy, wrapped up in brown paper, tied up with white string. Now he never whistles every day. Now he sings la la da diddly dum da diddly da da dum da dum, and so on, blah. Chitterlings and chicken wings, liver, tongue, or tail, gizzard, skirt, or marrow bone, game hen, grouse, or quail. There's trotters, T-bone, legs or thighs, brisket, neck, or jowl. Partridge, duck, and turkey, pheasant, and some guinea fowl. Ribeye, round or sirloin, topside, rump, or flank. Bison, goat, rummed and broiled, porterhouse or shank. Black pudding, bacon, rashers, scratchings, chicken feet. Haggis, ham, and sweetbread, there's every kind of meat. You've got shoulder, mutton, rabbit, a rack of lamb or chops, veal, venison type, and a kidney, heart, or hocks. Let's see, then it says, and the moral of this story is, if you want to win your Lucy, you better have a trusty bike and a sausage plump and juicy. A sausage plump and juicy, wrapped up in brown paper, tied up in white string. He whistled a happy tune when he was happy. Bum, bum. And he'd sing. And so that was going through my mind. I had to look it up. I had to look up the words and to share it with you. Didn't really sing that song, but that's how that song goes. And so remember, the moral of the story is, if you want to win your Lucy, all you need is a trusty bike and a sausage plump and juicy. Remember that, boys. So there you go. Howdy, Doug. Good to see you. Steve Clark, glad you made it in today. Siani Reese, nice to see you. And Barbie D and Ryan Gale. The Bear and the Maiden Fair. I think that was called the Bear and the Butcher Boy. Ryan Gale is their title for the song. So I did not sing that in presentation style. Just trying to get the words out, the lyrics, without just quoting lyrics. And the timing is funny because, with songs and music, things are always a little different. But there you go. Boys, is your sausage plump and juicy? That's how you win your Lucy. So there it is. Hey, Durwood, good to see you on board tonight. And who else we got? We got Master Finn, of course, is here. Good to see you, brother. And let's get this thing rolling. Let's get the show on the road, huh? And so my wife is exhausted tonight, I can tell. She was sitting here a few minutes before the show started in the studio, and she just looked, and she was crabby and grouchy. It's like everything I'd say, she's like, why would you say that? Guys, you know the drill. And sometimes we're like that. So, what was it Solomon said? Better it is to dwell on a housetop than in a wide house with a brawling woman. I would say with a crabby woman. So there you go. And maybe the vice versa works too. Audrey, good to see you. Nice to have you in the show, or in the chat room anyway. I'm on the show. And by the way, folks, I'm going to throw the invite up here. If anybody wants to call in for any reason tonight, mostly pertaining to the topic we're going to be talking about, or if you just want to talk or share something, there's the link. I just put it into the chat room, and you'll be able to see that. So happy Friday night, y'all, says Durwood. Vertigo is messing with me. You know, Durwood, I get a little bit of that myself. I don't know where it comes from. It's just I don't have the equilibrium I had 20 years ago. And I'll notice that. I'll just get up sometimes. I'm like, whoa, oh, hey, where's the wall? Catch myself. So that happens every now and then. And I don't have vertigo like you know, spinning, like the world's spinning around me. I just have no equilibrium these days. And the older I get, I'm also finding not just lack of equilibrium, it's a lack of flexibility. Now, perhaps that's because I don't get up and do Tai Chi in the morning or something like that. But I got to do something. I've said for 10 years, I got to start doing some yoga. I got to do something to loosen up my joints to, you know, my body is just, sometimes I got to just stand while I do this too, but my body is just starting to, Now, yesterday, I felt, maybe it was earlier today, I felt like my head was heavy and it was just dragging down my whole body. And I was like, oh, I said to Rainey, man, everything's heavy. She doesn't say much, you know, not a lot of sympathy because, you know, she's got her stuff going on too. And she doesn't feel very good these days, getting all those iron infusions, which should be helping her. But all the other little junk she has going on, and thyroid stuff and junk and this and that. And then the kids are just constantly on everybody's nerves these days. I don't know why. I was at my last nerve today. You know what I did today? Something I generally don't do in front of the children, and certainly not at school when we're picking them up. I went with Rainey to pick the kids up this afternoon. I drop them in the morning. She picks them up in the afternoon. And so we all went out today and picked up the kids together just to hang out together. And there's all these new roads they worked on for a year, building the roads to drop kids off and pick them up. And everything is just like one lane here, and you get stuck. And if you got to go, and you got the elementary school, the high school, and the middle school all along the same road. So all these kids all get out at the same time, well, 5-10 minutes apart from each other. And you're always sitting there just waiting. I'm always courteous. If there's somebody who needs to turn into a drive next to where I am, I stop. I don't block the driveway. If we're pulling up to pick up kids and there's 2 lanes of people, everybody's trying to get in because you pick up certain age group over here and a certain age group down this lane. The kindergartners are over there. So everybody's trying to cram into the same place. And I let a couple of people through, and then I had to pull over to the curb, and the guy behind me just gunned it in a pickup truck. So I couldn't pull into the curb in front of him. Ooh, I would have been in front of him. I would have delayed him another 10 seconds or so. And so what was my immediate reaction when he pulled in? I go, fucker. And I flipped him off. And Rennie goes, don't flip him off. Not at the school. Not that Rainey's afraid of that, but or using that type of language. We were at the school. I'm like, oh crap, I forgot about that. I said, I just got caught up in the moment. I was euphoric with my ability to tell that person how I felt about them being a dick. And you know, it's usually some guy in his pickup truck that thinks he can cut you off. And so Durwood, I got your lovin'. Hey, just stick around. I gave you some lovin', brother. And so then Rainey was like, well, remember, and you guys all remember because I told you about this, back when I was still in Louisiana, somebody had called CPS, Child Protection Services, on us because a teacher thought that we might be beating our children, which we don't do. And so we had to deal with that. And then Rainey says, careful, everybody here is going to think, we had CPS, and all these people think that we're, I said, who's all these people? These are people driving to pick up their kids. What are they like? Oh, you're the guy that a teacher called CPS on. And I'm like, that ain't happening. Hey, Don't cut me off like that, dickhead. So that was my attitude today. I was edgy. My kids have made me edgy lately because now we got 3 days straight of them at home, Saturday, Sunday, and they're off school on Monday. And it's just, I was working this afternoon designing a logo for someone, and every 2 minutes, a different child would come in with another topic. Or then Rainey would yell down, hey, I need the banana, what's the thing? And then the kid, and then another kid, and then Rainey something else. And then I would say something to Rainey. She says, I'm trying to do this thing. And just in one of those irritable days. You ever get them? I get them. I'm not going to talk about irritability today as far as how to cope with it and how to deal with it. For me, dealing with it today was an instant flipping some guy off without thinking about it. And there I am in front of all the school and the teachers lined up dropping kids at the cars for pickup. And I'm like, hey, how you doing, Mrs. Principal? So there you go. I tend to cuss out people in my car. Makes me feel better, says Siani. Yeah, I kind of do that same thing. So, yeah. And I'm not overly... What's the word I want to use for that? I'm not overly sensitive about that stuff. I mean, I'm not constantly swearing in the car at somebody, but I do from time to time. It's like, hey, nice move, dickweed. And you wish they could hear you. Like, I want to get a speaker on the front. Like, nice move, dickweed. And, oh, nice stop, dickweed. I hate that, especially at the school. A block from the school, and everybody's coming to and fro on that street, and some guys just roll right through the stop. It's so they don't have to wait for you to stop so they can make their turn. It's like, dude, you just gained 4 seconds on your day. And maybe he does that everywhere, so he ends up with a cumulative total of 2 minutes saved throughout the day. But anyway, those are the stuff that bugs me. All those good intentions are working good for you, says Matt to... was that for Barbie D or for Siani? Oh, she said, I got short with my youngest tonight. Every 5 minutes coming down with something insignificant. And, here's the thing is that for kids, everything's significant. And we got to keep reminding ourselves of that as parents. For me, my kids, it's like, Flynn, Dad, look at this. Even Sam walks in with his phone and he's got a funny meme. Look at this one, Dad. I'm like, hey, I'm working on something. Yeah, that's funny. That's funny as shit, son. And then something else. And then my son, of course, is sleeping on my sofa. He's waiting for this job to open up down in Texas and not hearing from the guy, friend of ours, not hearing from him. And so it's a little irritating. Rainey's like, he sleeps on the couch. He sits there and watches TV, gets on his internet, doesn't do much during the day. He's just kind of waiting for the ticket, the airline ticket to come in, which hasn't come in yet. And today we just had to kind of sit down and talk about, hey, maybe if something isn't happening the way you think it's gonna, you might have to start looking into some options. So I think that's an irritant. Not because he's my son. It's an irritant because it's another full-grown human being in the mix, and we don't have a guest room for him. So blah, 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 blah. Irritating day. You ever have an irritating day? Let's do this. Let's do one of these. Spark Courage. There it is, Spark Courage. You remember these? We did one the other day. This is the box full of fake matchsticks, but on every one of these is some kind of message. 50 ways to be bold. Now, we've done all of these in the past, I'm sure. Let's see what we get. If we just draw one out today, let's see what it has to say. See if there's anything about having an irritating day. Take responsibility for your actions and your behavior. There it is. There's today's matchstick courage, matchstick boldness. Take responsibility for your actions and your behavior. So you know what? When the guy cuts me off, it's not his fault that I flipped him off. It's my fault because that's how I chose to act. When my kids are irritating me and I yell at them, and it's okay to yell at your kids sometimes. But when I feel like I've been unjust with my kids, it's not because my kids made me do it. It's because I chose to react that way. When my wife pisses me off, yeah, my beautiful, lovely, vivacious, wonderful, intelligent, amazing wife sometimes pisses me off. What's my reaction? It's the reaction I choose. My wife doesn't make me do anything I don't want to do. Well, take that back. Don't tell her I said that, by the way. She thinks she makes me do a lot of things. But, one thing. My wife is so used to Rainey, my lovely Rainey, is so used to being a mom all the time, she sometimes mothers me. It's kind of like, and I'm not talking about the fun nursing part. I'm talking about, she talks to me like I'm a kid, like I'm one of her kids, and you got to get that thing done. If you don't get that thing done, I'm going to withhold sex for a week or whatever it might be. And there's the threats and the sword that's hung over your head, or it's we'll go out driving. And my wife is all the time from the passenger seat. If I'm the one driving, she's the one that's watch out. Do you see that person? Oh, look out. Slow down. Did you know you're going 25 in a 15? I said, yeah, I know. Do you know there's a red light up there? Do you see the red? Yeah, I see it. I've been driving for almost 50 years. I see it. Okay. And then I got to stop myself because I get irritated. And I go, thanks for pointing that out to me, though. I said, as irritating as it is, thanks for pointing it out. Now, me, when I'm in the passenger seat, by the way, maybe guys can find some affinity with this. When I'm in the passenger seat, I kind of shut up. I just do my own thing. I sit on the internet on my phone, or I talk to Rainey, or I'm reading an email, and if she's coming to a quick stop, the only time I'll ever say anything is if I'm like, watch out for that guy. He's pulling out. Whoa. Watch out for him. Look at that dude. He just cut you off. He almost ran you off the road. I try to be nice. Matt said I had our industrial parts washer go down, and I had a source part that was a pain in the arse. Been there too. And so, by the way, you notice when you're driving, it's, there was a comedian I heard say this. He says, do you ever notice when you see something like somebody runs into somebody else, or somebody's going to get hit by a car because of the pedestrian, the guy's not watching? He says, your reaction isn't, whoa, dude, look out. Whoa, look at it. It's always like, oh, I'll say to Rainey sometimes. There was one time where some guy was going to come headlong and probably run us off the road. I went, oh! And she said, what? And she slams on the brakes and turns and everything. What? I go, that guy almost hit us head on. And she said, well, why didn't you say so? I said, I did. I said, oh! So there you go. Anyway, I just put that matchstick away. Take responsibility for your own actions and your behavior. Nobody can make you do anything. It's the opposite of saying, do you know why I can't be offended? I'm not offended by anything anybody says in this cancel culture world and this and that and the other thing going on politically or anything else. Do you know why I can't be offended? Because being offended is a choice. I choose to be offended. I choose to let that thing offend me. And I've had people argue with me over that. Well, no, sometimes people are jerks and they're saying things, they're racists or they're Nazis or they're whatever. I said, that's on them. I don't have to buy into what they're saying. So I'm only offended if I choose to let what they're saying to me offend me. Because I can also choose to say, so what? I don't care. I don't care what you say. Sticks and stones may break my bones, dumbass, or whatever. So the opposite is true about our behavior and the way we act. Nobody can make me be offended unless I choose to be, and nobody can bring out my actions in me in a negative or non-positive way other than me. We are the masters of our attitudes, the masters of our behavior. If your behavior is out of control, maybe you need to go talk to somebody. Go see a specialist. Because we all have the ability to control the way we act, to govern ourselves. I always tell my kids, govern yourself. Govern yourself a little better. Be courteous. Be kind. Choose those things as opposed to, you get it. We've all talked about this. It's only racist if you want it to be. Exactly. Siani said that. So I agree with you. So anyway, there's our spark courage for today. Take responsibility for your own actions and your own behavior. If you do bad things, if you're doing bad things, if you're causing problems. I hear there's all this talk these days. People in chat rooms and running people down or gossiping. You know the best way to stop gossip? Don't do it. Don't participate in it. You know the best way to not tear other people down? Don't tear other people down. Doesn't matter. It's like we used to say, when did you start walking around in God's sandals? Who are you? God's gift to humanity? So that's kind of our thing, is that you don't have to say shit about anyone. Have a good time. This chat room, this is here for people to have a good time and participate. Enjoy the conversation. If you don't like the conversation, you can say, I don't like the conversation. I'm out. See ya. It's your choice. If you don't like anything I say or something I've said, you know what? You have the ability to tell me. You know what I've experienced, and maybe you've experienced this too. When somebody has a problem with me, I hear it from other people. 5 other people sometimes before I hear it from the person who told those 5 people that that they have a problem with me. That's where we also used to say he wouldn't say shit if his mouth was full of it. And that's something my mom told me when I was growing up. And if you got a problem with somebody, go to the person. Don't talk about the person to somebody else. What good does that do? All that shows is that you are discontent and you want to share your discontent with someone else. Well, grow the fuck up, pardon my French. Maybe grow a few balls, guys, and the female equivalent of balls. And go talk to the person you have a problem with. Air it to them. Don't air it to the world. And so that's actually a rule in our chat room. And I've got moderators there that will help do that and help keep that rule going. If I see it, I'll say, that's enough. Niceness. I do it on my Facebook page. When I put up a post and people start getting nasty with each other, I remind them, hey, you can say whatever you want. You can share your opinions. But if you start being abusive towards somebody else or saying something about somebody, it's done. You're done. I don't put up with that. I don't tolerate it. So choose your actions. Choose your attitudes. Beautiful. Matchstick courage. Boldness. There you go. Let's move on. Tonight, I wanted to talk about the sons of God, which we've talked about many times, the B'nai Ha Elohim, the sons of God, in the Nephilim story. But I want to see how that morphs into Enoch's vision of the new world, the next world to come. So if somebody asked you to name the origins of a story about gods who take human wives, then give birth to a race of semi-divine heroes, you might answer, that's a Greek myth. Or perhaps it's a Norse legend. Or maybe a folk tale from Africa or India. Surely this story wouldn't come from sacred scriptures of Judaism and Christianity. Or could it? We've talked about this before. And this to me is in context to looking at what we have the last few nights about Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel, Cain murdering his brother, Cain going off and marrying a wife and building a city with the other people, and then the spreading of population from that. So one of the seldom told stories in the Hebrew Bible is the passage from Genesis 6:1-4. Now, you can't say that here on this show because I wrote a book about it. I've talked about it several times. But it's a short story, and this is all it says. When mankind began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God, in the Hebrew, the B'nai Ha-Elohim, it's gods, the sons of the gods. And by the way, in general usage, in Hebrew, it's a singular, referring to Yahweh, the God of Israel, Elohim, but the him denotes plurality, as we've gone through many times on this show. So the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives of them from any whom they chose. And Yahweh said, my spirit will not be strong in man forever, for indeed he is but flesh. His lifetime will be 120 years. And the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God mated with the daughters of men, and they bore children for them. These were the heroes of old, and the men of renown. So for thousands of years, this story scandalized readers of the Bible, and for good reason. The story appears to go against the grain of our traditional understanding of biblical religion. But the story's there. And since it is, perhaps our traditional understanding is what's wrong. So perhaps to paraphrase Hamlet, there are more things in the Bible than are dreamt of in our philosophy. So let's look more closely. I've talked about this story before. This is a slightly different perspective on this, maybe from a little different angle than I've written and than we've talked about. Hey, Morgan Snow, good to see you. And Elderberry, nice to see you in here tonight. So in the past, many scholars have simply dismissed this whole story as kind of a biblical aberration. My seminary professors did that, if you remember the stories I've told. The reaction of the great 19th century scholar Julius Wellhausen is typical. He characterized the story as a cracked, erratic boulder. Like a cracked boulder, might best be just hauled away. Now, that's if you believe the scripture should be torn apart. Especially within those theological circles. So early Jewish and Christian commentators were also perplexed by the story. It was already anchored in holy text. And the only way to avoid the unpleasant implications of gods and humans marrying and having offspring was to provide an interpretation that could render it more palatable. And so the early rabbis understood the phrase B'nai Ha-Elohim to refer not to the sons of God, but to righteous men. They changed the meaning. And so the church, or as my seminary professors told me, the sons of the men of the aristocrats who built the school of the prophets. The church fathers, on the other hand, interpreted the phrase as a reference to the descendants of Seth, Seth's offspring, who was born of Adam and Eve after Cain killed Abel. And in this way, both the early Jewish and the early Christian interpreters avoided the problem of the polytheistic implications suggested by the sons of God. And neither of these interpretations is supported by the evidence in the text. That's the problem. They simply illustrate how early interpreters tried to tame a troublesome text that went against their thinking. Now, as we've covered many times in many other ways, the early church that was at battle, the early literalist Orthodox church in the first, second, mostly, and third centuries, they were always fighting with the agnostics. The Gnostics, the mystical teachers. Because why? Because the biblical texts that they had didn't seem to match up with what they wanted the church to teach. So, when you're in Christianity, you're learning an awful lot of things that are not in the original texts, but added on to. How are we to understand the story? They would ask. Are they amorous gods? Beautiful women? Sex? Curses and fame? It's all the elements of a successful soap opera. The Elohim, with mythic motifs thrown in for good measure. So there's enough here to understand, or is the story too cryptic, too broken? So I believe the text can be understood, but only by following a trail of clues that leads us to other texts in the Hebrew Bible and other ancient mythologies. And by the way, where I have said, where I talked about Cain and Abel being twins, the biblical text doesn't say that. But every other, as we've mentioned before, every other culture and religion that has a first family of creation always had multiple births mixed in. Why should Cain and Abel be any different? So the first step in our investigative trail is to ascertain the identity of the sons of God. And this is relatively easy. The sons of God in the Hebrew, the B'nai HaElohim, are known from several texts in the human Bible. The Hebrew Bible, I'm sorry, not the human Bible. Job 1:6, the sons of God present themselves to Yahweh in heavenly divine assembly. Later in Job 38:7, we learn that the sons of God have been with Yahweh at the creation of the world. Since the creation of the world, they've been there. When they see what God has wrought, it says the sons of God shouted for joy, the B'nai HaElohim. The sons of God again appear at Yahweh's divine assembly in Psalm 89, where Yahweh's incomparability among the gods is proclaimed. A simple scene is found in Psalm 29, where the sons of God, the B'nai HaElohim, sing praises to Yahweh. So perhaps the most intriguing reference to the sons of God is the famous Song of Moses, which comes after the Red Sea and during the Exodus. In Deuteronomy 32, just before Moses ascends Mount Nebo to die without entering the promised land, the text contains what's apparently an old mythological reference to the early history of humanity. Did you know this? Did you know this was there? Deuteronomy 32:8. The traditional Hebrew text reads, "When the Most High apportioned the nations, when he divided the sons of man, he established the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of Israel." Now, the sense of this passage is fairly clear until one comes to the last phrase. How can the borders of the peoples, including non-Israelite nations, be established according to the number of the sons of Israel? Has Israel already been established? Not yet. It's not even a nation yet. But Moses says the sons of Israel. So according to the sense of the text, it hasn't happened. There is something wrong in this passage. The end contradicts the beginning. So the contradiction doesn't appear in all Bibles. You look at the Revised Standard Version, the RSV, for example. There we read in Deuteronomy 32:8 that the borders of the people or the nations are fixed not according to the number of the sons of Israel, but according to the number of the sons of God, the B'nai HaElohim. So this reading is based on the Greek Septuagint. Remember the 72 rabbis, the Library of Alexandria, they rewrote the scriptures after the Babylonian captivity in the late 500s and early 400s BCE. So a Bible translation, it was actually made in the 3rd century BCE for Jews living in Alexandria who could not read Hebrew. The modern RSV translators decided that in the case of the Septuagint, rather than the received Hebrew text known as the Masoretic text, has preserved the original reading. Bible translations that adhere to the received Hebrew text, however, read sons of Israel instead of sons of God. So sons of God, the B'nai HaElohim, an Aramaic Deuteronomy fragment, suggests that the sons of Israel in received Hebrew text was later substitution to clean up the story. So recently clean up the story for people. So recently a fragmentary text from among the Dead Sea Scrolls was found to contain Deuteronomy 32:8. And it's written in late Herodian script. Now that's the 1st century BC to early 1st century AD, the Herodian period. And this fragment is now our earliest Hebrew text of Deuteronomy 32:8, going back all the way to the 1st century BCE. And the last phrase in the verse in this fragment clearly reads, the sons of God, the Bene Ha Elohim, not the sons of Israel. And so this reading, preserved in Greek in the Septuagint, but not in the received Hebrew text, seems rather clearly to be the authentic original reading. Goes back 2,000 years. So apparently somewhere along the line, the transmission of the standard rabbinic Bible, someone felt the need to clean up the text by literally rewriting it and substituting sons of Israel for the original sons of God. Yeah, Morgan, so they did a hell of a lot of cleaning. Now that we've established the correct text of Deuteronomy 32:8, we can use it to complete our portrait of the sons of God. According to the passage in Deuteronomy, the sons of God were not present at the beginning of the world, but also figured importantly in the division of the nations. So, not only present, I meant to say. I missed the word only. They were not only present at the creation of the universe and the world, but also at the dividing of the nations. So according to the following verse, Yahweh chose Israel as his own portion, implying that each of the other deities, the sons of God, the Bene Ha Elohim, also received a nation to rule over. Now this would make sense of the division of the nations according to the number of the sons of God. And we can see this in an indication that the sons of God at one time played a far more important role in the early history of humanity than is generally remembered in the biblical traditions. Now, keep in mind, we're looking at Hebrew religious theological mythology, the mythology of the ancient Hebrews. So does any of this exist as truth? I don't know. Well, it depends on what you want to believe by faith. But this is what the text says. So pre-Israelite Canaanite traditions contained seeds of the sons of God concept. For even earlier histories of the sons of God, we have to look outside the Hebrew Bible. And as with many other elements of Israel's religious traditions, the ancestry of the concept of the sons of God can be traced to pre-Israelite Canaanite traditions. Canaan, the land of Canaan. It's what today we so easily and offhandedly refer to as Palestine. It's not, the Palestinians didn't come till this last century. And so it's the Canaanites, the Canaanite region. So especially valuable in this regard are the 14th century BCE Canaanite texts written in cuneiform on clay tablets, discovered in 1928 at the ancient city of Ugarit on the Syrian coast. And these texts provide a wealth of information about the society, the religion, the narrative traditions of the Canaanite peoples in the periods before the emergence of Israel. As a matter of fact, Jacob and his tribe, Jacob renamed Israel, existed as a Canaanite tribe. So in the myths, the epics, the ritual texts from Ugarit, the phrase, the sons of God, the Banu Olai, or the Banu Olimi, occurs frequently in the Canaanite pantheon. The chief god is El in the Canaanite region. Remember I said the ancient Sumerian religions with the Anunnaki, you had El, Elil, Enlil, Enki, that those all transferred into the Canaanite culture, and Elil became El, or El, eventually El Shaddai, El Elyon, Elohim, those in the Hebrew religion, the Jewish religion eventually. And so in the Canaanite pantheon, the chief god is El, whose name literally means, El is the word for God. He and his wife Asherah are the father and mother of the gods. Remember Asherah? There were several of the minor prophets and some of the judges that were commanded by the prophet of God to tear down the Asherah poles of worship in Israel. So Asherah and his wife, El and his wife Asherah are the father and mother of the gods. The phrase, the sons of God, can be translated literally as the sons of El in the Canaanite texts. In the Hebrew, the sons of Elohim, the plural version of God. So, the Bene Ha-Elohim are found not only in the Ugaritic texts, but also in Phoenician inscriptions of the 8th to the 7th centuries BCE, and in the Ammonite inscription of the 9th century, recently found in Amman, Jordan. So the concept of the sons of God is pervasive. It's Canaanite lore over an extended period of time. And so the Canaanite roots of the sons of God, this is pre-Israelite, Canaanite roots of the sons of God, give us a glimpse into the antiquity of these figures. And they make it clear that these are indeed divine beings. The Israelite use of the term derives from the body of traditional lore that was inherited from the Canaanites, who inherited it from the Sumerians or the Mesopotamians. The concept of the sons of God, as well as the stories about them, doubtless go back far-reaching into Canaanite times. So, hey, Teresa, I see you made it in. Ryan Gale says, is that why God doesn't talk to anyone outside of Israel? Yeah, because God is the God of the Israelite nation, while the other Elohim were gods of the other nations. This is why God in the Ten Commandments, thou shalt have no other God before me. The commandments were given not to the world, they were given to Israel by Moses. And it was actually pre-Israel. It was to the Hebrew people. Moses brings down the tablets before they even reached the promised land and established the nation of Israel. And he says, you shall have no other gods before. I am the God of your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You shall have no other God before me. In the Hebrew, that's even clearer. It's implicating or implying that there are other gods to be had before him, but since you are an Israelite, you are Hebrew, I am your God, and you shall have none of the other ones before me. So it's a glimpse into the way they saw things in Canaanite antiquity. Now, in Israelite tradition, the sons of God are the lesser deities who accompany Yahweh and his heavenly assembly. Their sphere of activity is restricted to comparison to that of the Canaanite forebears. And this, of course, is due to the fact that in Israelite worship, Yahweh had subsumed the essential function of all the other gods. So only in a few passages are the activities of the sons of God prominent. These passages, especially Genesis 6, 1 through 4, which we read at the beginning of this, about the Nephilim, sons of God coming down, Deuteronomy 32, 8, these reflect traditions that are quite early. And indeed, these two passages will be quite at home among the Ugaritic mythological texts, except that the chief god is Yahweh rather than El. Remember, Yahweh is a Hebrew word based on the god Enki, who is also known in the Akkadian culture as Iyah, and Iyah being transferred down to the Canaanite region, Iyah became the base word for Yahweh, which is Jehovah. And so you've got Elohim and you've got Jehovah, two different entities. So then we go through who is the Nephilim? Was their destruction the original motive for the Genesis flood? We've talked about this before. You have to turn away from the sons of God for a moment to the offspring produced when they united with the daughters of men, as described in Genesis 6, 1 through 4. And although the language of the text is a bit choppy, it nevertheless seems clear that the offspring are referred to as the Nephilim. And these Nephilim are described as the heroes of old, the men of renown. So who are the Nephilim? Literally, Nephilim means the fallen ones, plural, because it's got the him, like an Elohim, denoting plurality, the him at the end of Nephal, Nephilim, the fallen ones, plurality. In Hebrew, the word is a common euphemism for the dead, the Nephilim. They will fall among the fallen. Jeremiah 6:15 tells us, and he uses the word Nephilim. In Ezekiel 32:27 in the Old Testament, we read of the Nephilim as warriors who have fallen. It says in Ezekiel 32, they lie with the warriors, the Nephilim of old, who descended to Sheol with their weapons of war. It's like the Vikings, the Danes in Valhalla. So elsewhere in biblical tradition, the Nephilim are described as the giants who were native inhabitants of Canaan. The report Moses, his advanced scouts, remember he sends them out when they first get to the promised land after 40 years of wandering after the Exodus. The advanced scouts give an account of their foray into Canaan. And this is what they said to Moses in Numbers 13:33. All the people whom we saw in its midst were people of great size. There we saw the Nephilim. The Anakim are part of the Nephilim. And we seemed in our own eyes like grasshoppers, and so we must have seemed in their eyes. In Deuteronomy 2:11, the giant Anakim, part of the Nephilim, are also called the Rephaim, more general term for the giant native inhabitants of Canaan. Two of the most famous of the Rephaim are King Og of Bashan, whose huge iron bed could still be seen on display in Rabbah of Ammon. And this is in Deuteronomy 3:11. And the giant warrior, Goliath, who is described as descended from the Rapha in Gath in 2 Samuel. So the Nephilim thus appear to be a race of heroes who lived both before the flood and in Canaan before the Israelites conquered the promised land. And so in these areas, the Nephilim end up, as their name suggests, as the dead ones. The Rephaim and the Anakim are said to have been wiped out by Joshua, by Moses, by Caleb, and through some stragglers, though some of these stragglers remained to be slain by David and his men. In Joshua 11:22, we're told that no Anakim remained in the land of Israel, but some remained in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod. Remember Goliath of Gath and his 2 or 3 other brothers. So the function of the Nephilim, Rephaim, Anakim, the giant demigods, these half-god, half-human, is constant in all these traditions. The demigods, the Nephilim are the demigods. Cain, I believe, was the first of these demigods, half-god, or half-Elohim, half-human. This is why they didn't trace the bloodline through him, the firstborn of Adam's twins and of his sons. Traced it through the thirdborn, because Cain wasn't of pure human blood. They existed in order to be wiped out by the flood, by Moses, by David and the others, and all these traditions. The function of the Nephilim in Israelite tradition is to die, the dead ones. So as we've already noted, Nephilim actually means the fallen ones, those who have fallen in battle, the dead ones. And the connection between death and the Nephilim appears to be basic to the several forms of the tradition. And so I believe that in the original version of the mating story in Genesis 6:1-4, the Nephilim were destroyed by the flood. Indeed, they were the cause of the flood. To understand this argument, however, you have to explore the Mesopotamian flood story, which is obviously related in some way to the flood story preserved in the Bible and Noah. And in the Mesopotamian flood story, the god's motive for the flood, as we now know from the old Babylonian myths of Atrahasis, I've spoken of him, it's a cosmic imbalance between the human world and the divine world. The human world is overpowered or overpopulated with humans, and the gods cannot sleep because of the noise. In the cuneiform texts about the tale of Atrahasis, it says, the people multiplied. The land was bellowing like a bull. At their uproar, the god became angry. Enlil heard their noise. He addressed the great gods. The noise of mankind has become oppressive to me. Because of their uproar, I am deprived of sleep. So says Enlil, the god of the Anunnaki, the chief god. So in this primeval era, according to Babylonian understanding, humans live forever. This is what created the overpopulation. Remember the eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? The Elohim said of Adam and Eve, they've eaten of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and have become just like us. People can still die from violence or starvation, but natural death had not been yet instituted. And after other effort, and this is all according to the biblical myth, and after other efforts of population control fail, Elil decrees the flood, which will kill all humans and take care of the noise problem. This is Elil's final solution, so to speak. However, Elil's wily advisor, the god Enki, attempts to thwart Elil's plan. Enki advises an exceedingly wise king named Atrahasis, the king of the humans, to build an ark for himself and for his family, and together with a menagerie of animals, in order to survive the flood. And when the flood recedes and Atrahasis and his family have survived, the gods Enlil, Elil, and Enki have a showdown. And finally, they agree on an acceptable compromise suggested by Enki to control the size of the human population. People will henceforth die natural deaths. They'll have an age. What does it say in Genesis 6, the Hebrew version of this? Toward the end there, and the beginning, I think in verse 5, it says, "And man's lifespan shall now be 120 years." Doesn't explain it like the story of Atrahasis does in the cuneiform text from the Sumerian culture, but it mentions it in the biblical account that Moses really plagiarized. So, Delaney says in 1912 in Delavan, Wisconsin, it's right near the Wisconsin Dells, by the way, it says giants were unearthed. Delavan Lake is shaped like a uterus. I believe that's the lake where they also say there's a pyramid beneath the water, and I've seen pictures of it, pyramids and stone circles and things like that, right here in Wisconsin, a couple hours from here. So, natural death becomes the fate of humanity. And this is a solution to the cosmic imbalance that brought the flood in the Babylonian account of the flood. So the Genesis flood occurs to punish human evil, to redress a cosmic imbalance. Slightly different. We learned it very differently. In the story in Genesis 6:1-4, the divine response to the cosmic imbalance of the demigods and the half-humans and so on, represented by the sons of God mating with the daughters of men, is likewise to limit human lifespan. "My spirit will not be strong in man forever," says Yahweh in Genesis 2:3, "for indeed he is but flesh, and his lifetime will be 120 years. And so the punishment is a decree of a limited lifespan, not the flood. Flood was meant to wipe out the Nephilim. The lifespan reduction is meant to wipe out humans, to prevent overpopulation. It's directed at humans, however, not at the Nephilim. So I believe that originally in the Israelite tradition, the motive for the flood was the destruction of the Nephilim. The sexual mingling of the sons of God and the daughters of men created this cosmic imbalance and a confusion in the cosmic order. Remember these prefects from heaven, the Elohim. It says in the Book of Enoch that they all set foot on the slopes of Mount Armon, which is Mount Hermon to the north of Israel, bordering Lebanon today. And they swore amongst each other that there were about 200 of them, that they were going to go in amongst human women and have children with them. And it says, and they loved them. They went into them, they married them, they loved them, they lived their natural lives with them. And they created the Nephilim, they created this offspring. And so when you start understanding that this is what the biblical text is actually saying, something's been left out. Some things have been edited. So the birth of the demigods threatened the fabric of the cosmos. The natural response in myth, as exemplified by the Babylonian flood tradition, was to suppress the imbalance by destroying its cause. In the Atrahasis myth, the tale of Atrahasis, you can read it. I just saw the book on my shelf somewhere. Modern interpretations or translations, newer translations of the old cuneiform texts from Mesopotamia, the Sumerian culture. And it talks about the tale of Atrahasis. Humanity is destroyed so that its noise would be eliminated. So the natural conclusion of Genesis 6, 1 through 4, according to the logic of the myth, is the deluge, the great flood, the destruction of humanity, the concomitant annihilation of disorder. And the cosmic imbalance is resolved by a great destruction out of which a new order arises. And something we're not going to get to tonight is the second part of this, which is Enoch's vision of this new order, this next great world order. But in Genesis 6, 1 through 4, it's come down to us that the conclusion of the old myth has been transformed. The flood is no longer the result of the sons of God, the Bene Ha-Elohim, these 200 prefects from heaven coming down and intermingling with the daughters of men. The conclusion of the myth has been detached from the flood narrative, though it still immediately follows it. The flood comes right after this account, beginning in Genesis 6:5. And a new motive has been supplied in the biblical account. The things we were all taught in synagogue or Sunday school. The motive in Genesis 6:5 through 8 is the increase of mankind's evil on the earth, not the increase of population, as in the Babylonian myth, nor the mixing of gods and mortals, as was originally the case in the myth, partially preserved in Genesis 6, 1 through 4. Now note the parallel use of the word multiply at the beginning of the mating myth in Genesis 6, 1 through 4, and at the beginning of the flood story that follows, beginning in Genesis 6:5. The story of the mating of the sons of God with the daughters of men begins. When mankind began to multiply on the face of the earth, the flood story begins. Yahweh saw that the evil of mankind multiplied on the earth. So in Genesis 6, 1 through 4, the problem is the mating between gods and humans. In the floods, it's right there in the Bible, in the book of Genesis. This is why it's important to know and understand the original languages if you're going to teach it on a theological level. In the flood story, it's human evil. In the book of Genesis, the parallel use of multiply on earth suggests a parallel construction, introducing cosmic imbalance. Genesis 6, 1 through 4. It's the mating of the gods and the humans in the Genesis flood story. It is human evil. In the Babylonian flood story, it's overpopulation. So the ethical nature of the biblical flood story is highlighted by this change in motive. In the Bible, the flood is brought on not by the cosmic imbalance caused by human overpopulation, but by the evil engaged in by humankind, the wickedness of man. And the new motive for the flood is found in Genesis 6, 5 through 7. Yahweh saw that the evil of mankind had multiplied on the earth, and that all the thoughts of his heart were only evil continually. And Yahweh repented that he had created mankind, and he was grieved in his heart. And Yahweh said, I will wipe out mankind whom I created from the face of the earth. So by truncating the original ending of the story in Genesis 6, 1 through 4, from its logical sequel, the flood, which would eliminate the cosmic imbalance of the gods mating with humans, the story of the sons of God taking wives of the daughters of men becomes simply one example of man's evil inclination. And so similar stories in the primeval cycle precede the flood story in Genesis. Thus, this new motive for the great destruction of the flood is presented. The story of the sons of God and the daughters of men has been rearranged and no longer serves as the primary motive for the great destruction. Isn't that interesting? Even in its original form. Now, here's the question. Is that the way Moses penned it? Because remember, Moses would have written these books, written the book of Genesis, around 1400 BCE. The rewriting of the Old Testament after the Babylonian captivity, when the rabbis went to Ptolemy II of Egypt and permission to enter the Library of Alexandria to reconstruct the Hebrew historical texts and the Hebrew biblical texts, the theological texts. When they did that, we got the Septuagint, the Greek version. It's a reconstructed version of the original. But in that, they left out. They kind of go there, but they don't go all the way. And they've changed the meaning. So when the Nephilim appear to die in the flood, they're still around later. The passage even says, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward. They die in another great destruction, the Israelite conquest of the promised land. So these great destructions bring to an end a primeval era, before the flood and before Israel existed. In both of these primeval eras, the Nephilim are doomed to die. So the story of the sons of God, the B'nai Ha-Elohim, the demigods, the half-human, half-gods, mating, not the half ones, the full ones, the sons of God, who are also known as the Watchers, mating with the daughters of men, is thus understandable on its own, and transported as it is, and is also understandable as a part of a carefully crafted larger whole, the cycle of stories leading up to the flood. And this cycle itself feeds into the stories of the patriarchs and the narration of the covenant between Yahweh and Israel. The primeval cycle in Genesis is characterized by a whole series of mythological transgressions of boundaries that result in a range of divine responses. And slowly, these responses build up to a new ordering of the cosmos. The mixing of gods and morals in Genesis 6:1-4 is mirrored by the mixing of the divine and the human in the Garden of Eden story, in which humans desire to be as gods, knowing good and evil. And I believe carried out with the impregnation of Eve by both Enoch, one of the sons of God, the B'nai Ha-Elohim, and Adam, and she bears the twin sons. One a demigod, one a human. The demigod murders the human. Then he's cast out of the garden and goes off and gets a wife and founds a city. A wife who is probably from a culture who did not have Elohim as their God. So similarly, that's hard to say. Similarly, in the Tower of Babel story, which we covered not long ago, where humans want to build a tower with its top in heaven, in Genesis 11, they're divinely punished by a confusion of tongues. In Genesis 6:1-4, the Nephilim story, the bounds between divine and human are also breached, and the result is a decree of the limit of man's lifespan to 120 years. The same basic pattern persists, as we saw in all the older tales. So the stories proceed in a dialectical fashion, generating oppositions and resolving them, all the while sketching a transition from a mythical nature to human culture. From an era when humans are naked and immortal to an era of clothing, mortality, hard labor, and nations, the era of the present world. So Genesis 6:1-4 fits really snugly into this context. It's the repetition of mythological transgressions of boundaries and the slow rebuilding or newly building up of the limitations of the human world. And this is where we start to launch now into Enoch's vision of the next world. The Book of Enoch gives you much more detail. Genesis 6, verses 1 through 4, give us what Moses supposedly wrote about the Nephilim and the intermingling of the sons of God, the Bnei Elohim, with the daughters of Adam. Enoch really expands on this. Hey, Steph, I saw you popped in to say hello. You listened some tonight. Good to see you if you're still sitting there. You're closing your eyes and listening. I hope you enjoyed it. So, folks, Michelle Cannon-Free is here, too, in the chat room. Welcome. Steve says, thank you for a very interesting and informative show tonight. You're welcome. So, Teresa, 1011, 1111. 1011 says Michelle Cannon-Free. 1111 says Teresa. Does that mean I'm late? Am I supposed to see that and go, oh, I ran overtime? I ran overtime. It's now on my end, it's 1012. So there you go. So, folks, I'm going to wrap this up. We've gone about as far as we can go tonight. And tomorrow is Saturday, so we're not doing a show tomorrow. Sunday morning, if Rainey doesn't have a pop massage coming up, she's going to be going with the kids to some scouting thing. I may have to do that too. Wait, is today Thursday or Friday? Yeah, today's Friday. So we have to go to a scouting thing tomorrow. The advancement into the next levels for the summer. And so we got to go do that tomorrow. And but I believe Sunday morning we'll both be here. And I know I will be. Rainey may join us as well if nothing else comes up. So she loves to be here. She just got so much going on. Massage and now scouts and yada yada. So watch for us on Sunday. Monday, I'm going to go into Enoch's vision of the next world. I'll just tell you at the very beginning of this, what's the appeal of that curious collection of tales that we find in the Book of Enoch? It is and was that it provides a glimpse into the beyond. Enoch reassures the faithful that there was and will be another reality far better than the present painful circumstances. And he says deliverance will take place soon. This was Enoch, and we're going to talk about that when we're together again on Monday of next week. So, folks, thanks for being here. I love the fact that you take your time to come in here and spend it with me. And so what I want to tell you right now is, you know what? Live long and prosper.
You're listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.